Penguin Random House Audio presents The Secret History, written and read for you by Donna Tartt.
For Bret Easton Ellis, whose generosity will never cease to warm my heart, and for Paul Edward McGlowan, Muse and Mycenas, who is the dearest friend I will ever have in this world. I inquire now as to the genesis of a philologist, and assert the following. 1. A young man cannot possibly know what Greeks and Romans are. 2. He does not know whether he is suited for finding out about them. Friedrich Nietzsche. Unzeitgemäße Betrachtungen. Come then, and let us pass a leisure hour in storytelling, and our story shall be the education of our heroes. Plato, Republic, Book 2. Prologue. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. He'd been dead for 10 days before they found him, you know. It was one of the biggest manhunts in Vermont history. State troopers, the FBI, even an Army helicopter. The college closed, the dye factory in Hampton shut down, people coming from New Hampshire, upstate New York, as far away as Boston. It is difficult to believe that Henry's modest plan could have worked so well, despite these unforeseen events. We hadn't intended to hide the body where it couldn't be found. In fact, we hadn't hidden it at all, but had simply left it where it fell, in hopes that some luckless passerby would stumble over it before anyone even noticed he was missing. This was a tale that told itself simply and well. The loose rocks, the body at the bottom of the ravine with a break in the neck, and the muddy skid marks of dug-in heels pointing the way down. A hiking accident. No more, no less. And it might have been left at that, at quiet tears and a small funeral, had it not been for the snow that fell that night. It covered him without a trace, and 10 days later, when the thaw finally came, the state troopers and the FBI and the searchers from town all saw that they had been walking back and forth over his body until the snow above it was packed down like ice. It is difficult to believe that such an uproar took place over an act for which I was partially responsible. Even more difficult to believe I could have walked through it. The cameras, the uniforms, the black crowd sprinkled over Mount Cataract like ants in a sugar bowl, without incurring a blink of suspicion. But walking through it all was one thing. Walking away, unfortunately, has proved to be quite another. And though I once thought I had left that ravine forever on an April afternoon long ago, now I am not so sure. Now the searchers have departed, and life has grown quiet around me. I have come to realize that while for years I might have imagined myself to be somewhere else, in reality I have been there all the time, up at the top by the muddy wheel ruts in the new grass, where the sky is dark over the shivering apple blossoms, and the first chill of the snow that will fall that night is already in the air. "What are you doing up here?" said Bunny, surprised, when he found the 4 of us waiting for him. "Why, looking for new ferns," said Henry. And after we stood whispering in the underbrush, one last look at the body and a last look round, no dropped keys, lost glasses, everybody got everything, and then started single file through the woods, I took one glance back through the saplings that leapt to close the path behind me. Though I remember the walk back, and the first lonely flakes of snow that came drifting through the pines, remember piling gratefully into the car and starting down the road like a family on vacation, with Henry driving clench-jawed through the potholes and the rest of us leaning over the seats and talking like children, though I remember only too well the long, terrible night that lay ahead and the long, terrible days and nights that followed, I have only to glance over my shoulder for all those years to drop away, and I see it behind me again, the ravine, rising all green and black through the saplings, a picture that will never leave me. I suppose at one time in my life I might have had any number of stories, but now there is no other. This is the only story I will ever be able to tell. Book 1. Does such a thing as the fatal flaw, that showy dark crack running down the middle of a life, exist outside literature? I used to think it didn't. Now I think it does. And I think that mine is this, a morbid longing for the picturesque at all costs. À moi, l'histoire d'une de mes folies. My name is Richard Papin. I'm 28 years old, and I had never seen New England or Hampton College until I was 19. I'm a Californian by birth, and also, I have recently discovered, by nature. The last is something I admit only now, after the fact, not that it matters. I grew up in Plano, a small Silicon village in the north. No sisters, no brothers. My father ran a gas station, and my mother stayed at home until I got older and times got tighter, and she went to work, answering phones in the office of one of the big chip factories outside San Jose. Plano. The word conjures up drive-ins, tract homes, waves of heat rising from the blacktop. My years there created for me an expendable past, disposable as a plastic cup, which I suppose was a very great gift, in a way. On leaving home, I was able to fabricate a new and far more satisfying history, full of striking, simplistic environmental influences. A colorful past, easily accessible to strangers. The dazzle of this fictive childhood, full of swimming pools and orange groves and dissolute, charming showbiz parents, has all but eclipsed the drab original. In fact, when I think about my real childhood, I am unable to recall much about it at all, except a sad jumble of objects. The sneakers I wore year-round, coloring books from the supermarket, and the squashed old football I contributed to neighborhood games. Little of interest, less of beauty. I was quiet, tall for my age, prone to freckles. I didn't have many friends, but whether this was due to choice or circumstance I do not now know. I did well in school, it seems, but not exceptionally well. I liked to read, Tom Swift, the Tolkien books, but also to watch television, which I did plenty of, lying on the carpet of our empty living room in the long, dull afternoons after school. I honestly can't remember much else about those years, except a certain mood that permeated most of them, a melancholy feeling that I associate with watching The Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday nights. Sunday was a sad day. Early to bed, school the next morning. I was constantly worried my homework was wrong. But as I watched the fireworks go off in the night sky, over the floodlit castles of Disneyland, I was consumed by a more general sense of dread, of imprisonment within the dreary round of school and home. Circumstances which, to me at least, presented sound empirical argument for gloom. My father was mean, and our house ugly, and my mother didn't pay much attention to me. My clothes were cheap, and my hair cut too short, and no one at school seemed to like me that much. And since all this had been true for as long as I could remember, I felt things would doubtless continue in this depressing vein as far as I could foresee. In short, I felt my existence was tainted, in some subtle but essential way. I suppose it's not odd, then, that I have trouble reconciling my life to those of my friends, or at least to their lives as I perceive them to be. Charles and Camilla are orphans. How I longed for this harsh fate. Reared by grandmothers and great-aunts in a house in Virginia. A childhood I like to think about, with horses and rivers and sweet gum trees. And Francis. His mother, when she had him, was only 17. A thin-blooded, capricious girl with red hair and a rich daddy, who ran off with the drummer for Vance Vane and his musical Swains. She was home in 3 weeks, and the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?